quarter's budgets. But I think we are going to have an interesting day today. I think when we look at a budget, what you see on the top is not what is the reality. And as you drill deeper and deeper and deeper, you'll realize there's a lot of detailing and a lot of fine print which tells you. So I think my comments, when I welcome all of you, is to talk about 3 or 4 things. The first and most important thing is that the budget is not supposed to be a tamasha. I think somewhere last 15, 20 years, media has made into tamasha, a lot of speculation. All of us are asked to comment what should be in the budget as if somebody cares about what we think, right? But then we all give comments and bites and so on and so forth. Actually, budget is a financial or a business statement of the government of India. It basically talks about where the money will come, where the money will go, how are they going to spend their money. So for the first time, I felt when I heard that budget speech yesterday, I was feeling happy that it's becoming a business document. And if you saw yesterday, an outstanding document produced by the government of India, which is the graphics of all the data were presented in a graphical form, which was published by the government. Normally, video would have done it and got a lot of share of video shares, but unfortunately or unfortunately, government of India is ahead of us. They have become an outstanding visual presentation of the entire budget. So I think what you can see from India as we move into the budget, I think government is becoming a marketing agency. They're smart in deciding what they want us to know, what they want us to understand, and therefore a lot of emphasis comes in the communication piece. And I put a hats off to the finance minister and the prime minister. But having said that, I think there are 3 or 4 things which I feel from our standpoint in Telangana especially, and more specifically from South India. The first standpoint, I think, is that there's nothing much to talk about in the opposition states. Telangana Chief Minister yesterday went online, went to the media and made a very powerful statement that I think has been one of the most disastrous or most disappointing budget for the state of Telangana. Prior to that, our finance minister and also K.T. Ramarao had sent a lot of letters to the finance minister of India.
You're calling this thing chai?
Yeah. Can you mute them at least? Yeah, somebody is to mute when they are speaking. Your video should be on, your audio should be off. Thank you. So I think Telangana has come out very strongly against that budget. They said no big projects for Telangana. But I think the reality is to look at sectorally, because I think the real truth is somewhere there. And therefore, I think this is a wonderful session where we are inviting people to speak sectorally. And the PLI scheme, in my mind, is one of the game changers in Make in India from sectorally. Again, they can tweak it the way they want it for sectors. And I think in the same format, the government is also looking at sectorally, how do we address the issue of growth? How do we get growth back on track? So I think that is something very positive. I'm looking forward to listening from each of the speakers today about sectorally, what are the impact they've seen. But I want to talk about 2 or 3 things which are missing in the budget. To me, the biggest challenge, and I think many of us miss it continuously, I missed it for 25 years, is to ask the government very simple question. We gave you money 2 years ago. We gave you money last year. You are now telling us how you spent the money. Where is the performance audit of the money that you spend? The government never publishes data on what they did. They know that they spent that money there. We know a lot of diversion of money happens in various heads of government, heads in the government accounting. We all know that. But we never get a performance report. We never get the state of the economy report. The chief economist of the government of India should be asking this question to the ministry. I gave you so much money last year. What are the measurable outcomes have you got? Can you share with us? What was the expectation? What have we actually done? And this is what we do in our corporate sector all the time, asking about target versus actuals. So I think somewhere one message I want to say, and I hope sometime, I mentioned this to the chief economic advisor once who came to Hyderabad, saying that performance audit, we need to demand from the government that we are giving you lakhs of crores, you're distributing the money. And of course, there are several issues on distribution, but leave that aside. We want to see what is the value which we got out of that money. Rajiv Gandhi famously said only 5 paisa or 8 paisa for every rupee that government spends goes to the actual beneficiary. We don't know what's happening. And actually, one of the bigger challenges which all of us face in South India especially, or the states especially, by adding this cess and other formats, we're not distributing that money. The money goes to the central government and there's no transparency on where the money is coming on the cess, On the devolution of the money, yes, we have some data. We know that how much money government is collecting and how much all of us are getting. I think the most important point from South Indian point of view, our biggest pain point is transparency. I think especially on the GST, which is a very big area of dispute, our state government has been saying that we are not getting money on time. So I have only one question. First of all, if GST is the way to collect money and all the money is available online, all the data is available online, the Tamil Nadu finance minister mentioned in one of her speeches, he's not getting access to the data of GST. It's only limited data, what the states can see. My point was GST Council is the owner of the entire GST portal. GST Council is owned by the states along with the center. So the entire data on the GST should be available on tap to every single state government so that they can make their policies, they can make some reality of predictions of where the money will come in. So I think in summary, South India's biggest complaint is that the devolution of money is not happening on time. There's no transparency. There are disputes on what the amount is due to me. And I think these are some of the things which I wanted to present from Telangana's point of view or some concerns. And the big projects are still going to BJP states. I think that's the Gujarat, for example, I wrote about it recently, that Gujarat has got the permission, gift state, which is basically Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar, has been given permission to open up all foreign universities to come into Gujarat. Now, where is the education in India? If you look at data on where the really education is happening in India, it is happening in South. The largest amount of action in class 12, especially class 12 in university, is happening in Andhra Pradesh, Hyderabad. The largest class 12 education system, supporting system happens in Hyderabad. But unfortunately, this is going to Gujarat, where education is not a priority for most of the Gujaratis. I hope some of them are here. But if you ask honestly, I've lived in Gujarat and we are very close to Gujarat. For them, education is not a priority. Business is a priority. In South India, education is number one. This should have been in South India, but it is now in Gujarat. So anyway, in summary, my submissions are, I'm looking forward to all of you. I want all of us to articulate a lot more about what we think. It's a federal state. In the federal system, states have a right to say what happens in their state, why they're not getting the rightful share. And therefore, this kind of a forum, this kind of an opportunity to share these ideas is highly welcome. I see some of these state chairs and co-chairs. I welcome all of them for this event. And let's hope that at the end of today, they will get some valuable insights, which I think Akhilesh and are we recording this call, Akhilesh? I hope you record it so that we can extract some value and then send it to Vicky at the center.
Yes, sir. It is being recorded, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And over to you, Vandana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That is really a very in-depth point which you have shared with all of us. And may I request Mr. Rudra Chatterjee, Managing Director, Duxmi Group Chairman, OBT Manor and News, Chairman for FICCI West Bengal State Council, and also FICCI Furniture Committee, to present his views on an industry perspective, please.
Thank you very much.
Over to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Vandana. Thank you to the other chairs who are here and all of you who are listening. Thank you, Mr. Muralidharan, for your opening remarks. So I think what Mr. Muralidharan started with, that what is a budget? It's actually great that yesterday we heard the expenditure and income, which is the most important document. The biggest issue, I think, in yesterday's announcement was the expenditure, which is 38 lakh crores, which comes to around $500 billion. So significantly higher expenditure than ever before. I remember in the past, we had a target of having a budget deficit of 3%, and he had brought it down to 3%. And so during the last couple of years, many governments around the world were having bigger budget deficits, saying that this is because of COVID. It was in UK, in US and other countries. I think this is the budget, which is the expansionary budget. We waited for a couple of years, but having this massive expenditure, now obviously over the days, we will see the details of that expenditure. But having a big expenditure of $500 billion with a multiplier is a significant demand generator, should be a significant demand generator. So that is one aspect of the budget. I fully agree that that is the key point. The second aspect of that $500 billion which was announced was in capital expenditure. And that was 7.5 lakh crores. 7.5 lakh crores is $100 billion, which again is the highest amount of budgeted capital expenditure in a budget. If you read it with the economic survey, it talks about the need of capex, which is much higher than $100 billion. So hopefully this is 1 out of 3 tranches, which might be spent over 3 years, which will be higher than expected capital expenditure in a budget. And if so, will that close the gap in the requirement? There is no doubt, I think none of us doubt that India's infrastructure is one of the weaknesses. To fix the infrastructure, capital expenditure is required. So will it close the infrastructure difference between India and other countries with who we compete? So when we're talking about competition, I will come to services, because that is also very interesting to us in West Bengal. But I'll start with manufacturing. In manufacturing, if we have the skills of manufacturing, we would, in any product, we would need a competitive factor cost to manufacture the product at a competitive price. So let's assume one product. Let's say it's mobile phones. So in mobile phones, we had a goal of manufacturing mobile phones. But we would tend to import most of the mobile phones from Southeast Asian countries. Southeast Asian countries, what are the things that go into making a mobile phone? So the cost of manufacturing includes significantly a cost of power, which traditionally, if you go state by state in India, it's more expensive than any Southeast Asian or Chinese region. Second is cost of logistics, moving one unit from another, where it is more expensive in India by a factor of, not only it's a multiple. It's not 10% more expensive or 15% more expensive. It could be 50% more expensive in some cases, 75% more expensive in some cases. Especially in products like furniture, that becomes a big issue, because one container of furniture is $20,000 of furniture. So transporting furniture is a big cost. The third is cost of capital. So then is the corporate tax. So I think in some ways, we've started chipping away at those issues. We started with corporate tax. Yesterday, we made a significant announcement about logistics. Obviously, we are all waiting to see what that means. As Mr. Muralidharan said, it was a presentation with a lot of pictures, but what does it mean? What will it do to river transport? What will it do to road transport? What will it do to air transport? How much will it cost me to move something from one part of the country to another part of the country? What will it do to power cost? If the capex is coming in, there were talk about solar energy, manufacturing of solar panels. So ultimately, manufacturing has to go line by line and say, these are the cost structures. This is how something that is made in one part of India is going to be competitive with the same material made elsewhere in the world. Because only if we are competitive in the world, then we can start exporting. Otherwise, how many industries will you close to competition from global competition? So it has to be something that is both consumed within India and we can export it. So to take the example of furniture, in furniture, what are the big costs? Power is not a big cost, but cost of capital is not such a big factor. The big costs of furniture are land, labor, logistics. So in terms of and of course the main raw material, which is wood. So in terms of land cost in India is quite high, especially if you want to buy land where logistics cost is low, which is in the ports. That's where the land cost is highest. And you need a lot of land to make a furniture plant. Labor cost is obviously low. It will be good for the country when it goes higher. But that will need to be skilled labor. So the number of units of furniture that one worker can make in a day or X number of days, that also will be built over time. Third is the material cost. So wood obviously grows freely in India, but there is no policy on making wood for timber, which is FSC certified wood, Forestry Sustainable Council certified wood. Most of that is imported. If you import it, there's a 5% tax. Everybody agrees in the government of India that that is not a good idea. And everybody has agreed for more than 2 years that it is not a good idea. But that needs to become a 0% if you were to export that furniture. So that is in the segment when it comes to furniture. It is probably true for many other manufacturing products, especially the labor-intensive manufacturing products. Then I'll come to another manufacturing product, which is in South India also, you make a lot of it. I make a lot of it. It's this growing tea. So we make it in Darjeeling, we make it in Assam. India is obviously one of the largest producers of tea. Which, Dilma is a big tea brand in Sri Lanka. We obviously have Lipton, which is there in India also. But among the top 10, 15 tea brands in the world, can you name one homegrown Indian tea brand? When we are thinking of creating a product which is globally competitive, it should be people in the supermarkets around the world should be buying a tea which is packaged or at least branded in India. It could be packaged in Dubai or it could be packaged closer to the market. But like it is today, most of the world is buying mostly English, British brands, or in some cases, American brands also, if it's Tazo for Starbucks, and now there's a David's tea in Canada, there's Dilma tea in Sri Lanka, many others. But food processing is in a general, but this is a specific example of food processing, where you have the capital investment, the testing to ensure chemical use, to doing the bagging and then transporting. The same story which I'm sharing for tea is true for many other spices and many other things that India makes, which can be found around the world, but not in Indian cans or Indian packaging. And that's where, I think manufacturing, there's a big issue. And that's where I think there has been significant talk about infrastructure, and infrastructure should definitely help. But I think some specific areas of PLI on these areas, or some other way to incentivize these sectors. I think PLI is a great scheme because it's not just exports. It's true for Indians as well. So Indians can start buying good quality packaged food, good quality furniture, along with today, most of the furniture that India is buying is imported. Interestingly, there's no duty on importing furniture from Vietnam, although there's a duty of importing wood from Vietnam. Okay. Because India has an FTA which applies to furniture with Vietnam. Vietnam is a big producer of furniture. So the raw material can come with taxes if we were to manufacture it, but the finished product is coming tax-free. That used to be true for mobile phones also because of FTA. And with PLI, that has changed. So these things are being, both the infrastructure, the structure in which these products are made, and the final products itself, the factor and the goods are being dealt with very effectively through these budgets. But I think we can take a few particular examples like the scale committee. FICCI is part of some of the scale committees are doing. So I think that's a positive, and that's very important for the development of these businesses in the country. I think lastly, I just mentioned that you mentioned about education. I think that is a critical area. I think increasing our education budget, increasing both at home, at school, online and physical education, and bringing in all the resources that are needed so that we overspend on education. But that is significantly up to the states, not just to the center. Education is a state subject. So it's significantly up to the states, but there are technologies and systems that need to be brought in because, of course, the skills of our country, India doesn't have the oil that Middle East has. Our main, our resource is our talent, and that has to be nurtured. And I think if we can fix our infrastructure, if we can fix the other factors of production, it creates a very significant basis on which this economy can double every 6 to 7 years in a nominal level, and in a real level maybe over 10 years. That is very much doable. I think this budget has a long-term aspect to it, which is positive. It also has not really changed the tax rates. I think tax rates should not be changed every budget. If we can create that system that when a business person is investing, he should at least know that 90% of what he sees today in policy will remain true for the next 3-4 years. So that that doesn't keep changing. It's not like there are enough issues with what's happening to demand without the rules of the game constantly being upended while you are making that investment. So that is again another positive of the budget. But in general, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your views on manufacturing, especially manufacturing sector. Thank you once again, sir. May I request Mr. Roni Anthony, Partner for Tax and Regulatory Services, BDO India, to present his views on direct taxes, please.
Thanks, Vandana. So let me just share my screen. I'm presuming that, yeah. One second. Yeah, all right. So just wanted to kind of take this entire, first of all, a big thank you to Vicky for having us, both me and Sandeep. I'll primarily be focusing on the direct tax proposals of the budget. My colleague Sandeep Parekh will focus on the indirect tax proposal. If you look at what the budget has set out to accomplish, I think one critical thing is that there has not been too many big bang changes. I think a lot of times we expect the budget to have a lot of big bang changes, and somehow the strength of a budget is viewed from the perspective of how disruptive it tends to happen. While this budget did not have a lot of big bang changes, there could be other factors which are driving that. What the budget documents do present is a carefully articulated way of dealing with problems in the existing income tax provisions, basically the procedural aspects, etc., while really handling the budgetary inflows, both from a direct tax collection and indirect tax collection, and keeping that stable. So if you look at the direct tax proposals, from an individual standpoint, there has been no change in the tax rates. However, there's a small tinkering in terms of long-term capital gains tax. So effectively, there is that the surcharge has been effectively reduced, that the net effect of the surcharge is now a long-term capital gains tax of 23.92, which is from a 28.5%, a good drop, ensuring that there is a parity between the long-term capital gains suffered on shares of transfer of unlisted securities. For companies, there has been no change, but there has been some tinkering in terms of benefits for certain emerging sectors, etc. I'll just come to that point shortly. What has happened is for the others, which is cooperative societies, etc., the minimum alternate minimum tax, AMT, has been reduced from 18.5 to 15%. And the surcharge has been reduced from 12 to 7%. So, and the AOP, which if it consists of members of only companies, that is capped at 15%. So just like I said, the government has not tinkered too much around with the rates. It's just rationalized some of these rates to remove the inconsistencies between different classes of taxpayers. From an individual standpoint, so given that COVID had a significant impact on the general populace, and India obviously had a lot of damaging effects by virtue of COVID. While the impact on the industry and the economy has been significant, one must not forget that the impact on individuals as such has also been very hard hitting. So what the government has essentially brought in a favorable tax regime for any amount which an individual receives towards medical treatment expenses of where a person has been has deceased because of the COVID pandemic. Such amounts received are not subject to income tax. So there's no monetary limit if it is received from an employer. It has gone one step further, up to 10 lakh rupees. If it is received from any other persons other than an employer within 12 months from the date of death, even that is not subject to tax. So this provides some kind of a relief for the populace who's already had to deal with the damaging effects and personal losses. One thing that obviously, India has seen a flurry of startups. Obviously, some of them have hit the unicorn status, some have hit the decacorn status, etc. And as India's startup environment kind of grows to match that of the US, the incentive that was provided in the previous budget for an eligible startup having a tax holiday was ending on 31st March 22. So that period has been extended to 31st March 23. Apart from that, if you remember at the start of the COVID pandemic, and the government had actually extended or brought in an incentive that where a company starts manufacturing or production, there would be a concessional tax regime. That again was coming to an end in 31st March 23. That is the setup of production. The government has changed the date to 31st March 24, giving another year's extension. This is an interesting provision that has come up. The concept of an updated tax return. And now, there's a new provision introduced which enables a taxpayer to file an updated tax return and declare any amount that he may have missed while filing an earlier tax return. Now, in cases where people have also not filed a tax return, the government has made this provision available to file an updated tax return. However, there's a little additional cost of filing an updated tax return, which is that there would be an additional tax payable if it is filed within 1 year from the end of the relevant assessment year, which is 25% of the aggregate tax and interest payable. So if you have if you're offering any additional income through this updated tax return, then you will compute your liability, but you'll also have to pay an additional 25% of that liability. If you're filing it within 1 to 2 years, then the amount of that 25% gets increased by 50%. The idea is obviously that people get the opportunity to amend their tax return, correct any discrepancy or omissions. But at the same time, the government is also bringing in a provision which also sends a message across that, look, please take your tax filing obligations seriously. Otherwise, you will end up paying an additional component of tax. If this is delayed and the updated tax return and the previously filed original tax return has a significant variance. There's obviously restriction in terms of search and survey cases where this updated tax return obligation or the provisions will not apply. This obviously is one area which largely has seen a lot of action last year. There was a lot of confusion, and especially on the taxation of crypto assets, right? And India has seen obviously a flurry of activity by investors investing in cryptocurrencies and crypto assets. What the government has done is now proposed a new tax regime classifying all of this as virtual digital assets. Now, the tax that is proposed is a flat rate of 30% on any income arising from the transfer of a virtual digital asset. Other than the cost of acquisition, the government does not propose to grant any deduction of expenses. Also, there is no ability to either offset this loss against if there's any loss on transfer of a virtual digital asset, then there is no ability to offset any loss against other income, nor the ability to carry forward such loss. And just to ensure that there is more transparency and an ability for government to monitor, there is also a TDS on transfer, which is that the at the time of transfer, then the buyer is also obligated to withhold certain tax, so that and therefore there'll be a reporting mechanism, therefore government monitoring on the transfers of virtual digital assets. There have been a lot of amendments which clarify some of the legislative intent. One such issue largely arose, and I think a lot of companies have taken this position in their previous tax return, which is a deduction of the health and education cess. So that was a questionable or an area of debate among the professional community, whether health and education cess is a deductible item or is it a tax. The government has clarified that the health and education cess is a tax and therefore not allowed this as a business expenditure, and this is amended with retrospective effect from 2005. But the government has obviously positioned this as a clarificatory amendment. Apart from that, just to bring in clarity, the government has also sought to disallow expenses which is a violation of a rule or a rule of law or regulation or guidelines. This includes any benefit or perquisite given to any person in violation of a rule or regulation. We've seen a lot of articles and flurry around this particular amendment. The intent is obviously to disallow business expenditure of or expenditure which is considered as business expenditure, but which is granted to individuals, which could possibly be in violation of a rule or law. The primary thing that comes to my mind is obviously the medical community. Pharma companies will tend to get impacted by this because the SOPs that they give to doctors and the likes could be subject to this kind of disallowance. Previously, pharma companies, etc., could claim that as a business deduction, but this amendment, clarificatory in nature, is trying to plug that particular expenditure as a deduction. Again, there is a disallowance under Section 14A. Now, there was largely an element of doubt is, does the disallowance under Section 14A apply where there is no exempt income in a particular tax year? They have now clarified that this deduction, this disallowance under 14A will continue to operate even in a year when there is no exempt income. Thereafter, there's also an amendment relating to deduction for conversion of outstanding interest to loan. So the interest payable, if it is converted into a loan, is deemed to not have been paid. So therefore, this deduction, which was previously possible because interest is a allowable expenditure, is now, it's been clarified that that is not the intent, and therefore such interest which is converted into loan will not be allowed as a deduction. I will move on to some procedural matters, given obviously that there could be a paucity of time and we are hitting the thing, which is some rationalization of the procedures, etc. Now, if you see, largely there has been a move towards a faceless assessment. We had seen that the faceless assessment scheme was notified, and that has operated in some form or manner. The finance bill yesterday has recast the entire faceless assessment scheme in a manner that now authorities will conduct. There will be a faceless assessment center, which will have multiple assessment units. It will have a verification unit, a technical unit, and a review unit. And The idea is that over a period of time, the faceless or national faceless assessment scheme will operate to handle all forms of assessments. Apart from that particular large change that has come up on the faceless assessment, there is some rationalization in the case of reassessments, etc., which is one of which is that the AO is not required to seek an approval before passing a speaking, where a speaking order has been passed in the case of a reassessment. Also, in the case of reopening of reassessment beyond 3 years and within a period of 10 years is permitted where the income has escaped or likely to have the income likely to have escaped taxes beyond rupees 50 lakhs. This is something just to ensure there's some rationalization of the reassessment proceedings. Also, the term information which is used in the reassessment proceedings includes any audit objection. There is some received from a foreign jurisdiction under a bilateral information exchange agreement, or which is received through a faceless collection of information or through a court directed, would also widen the tax, the net to for the assessing officer to go through the reassessment proceedings. Foreign companies, previously the tax rate on foreign dividend income was provided at a beneficial rate of 15%. Now, this was in line with the previous norm, which is the dividend distribution tax. So when Indian companies paid dividends out to shareholders, there was a dividend distribution tax, and therefore the beneficial rate was tied to the rate available under Section 115(o) of the Income Tax Act. Now the dividend distribution tax has been abolished. This benefit of a beneficial reduced rate of 15% on dividends received by an Indian company from its foreign subsidiary is being done away with. In terms of the international, the IFSC, there has been some, benefits that is subject to certain conditions. Certain incomes are exempt from tax. This is obviously to give a lot more impetus to the IFSCs. So hopefully this will see a lot more traction in the future years to come. And obviously the GIFT City in Gujarat is the obvious beneficiary of these provisions. So clearly we will see a lot more impact of these provisions in the years to come. Other changes is that certain clarificatory amendments have been brought in terms of the timelines for transfer pricing assessments, DRP and ITAT to become form part of a faceless assessment scheme. So schemes will be notified. Their timelines have been extended up to 31st March. So giving enough time to the government to formulate, or the income tax department to formulate a proper mechanism to handle some of these through the concept of faceless assessment. Yeah. With this, I will conclude my discussion on the direct tax proposals. Back to you, Vandana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony, for sharing his views on direct taxes. May I request Mr. Bhupesh Nagarajan, CMD, Indira Projects, and co-chairman of FICCI Tamil Nadu State Council to share your views, please, sir.
Good evening, everyone. And first of all, I apologize. My throat is not very good. So from the yesterday, it's been a long talks. So sorry for that. And I'm very glad that I can meet my fellow colleagues from different states. So I took this opportunity to present our view from Tamil Nadu. As mentioned by Mr. Muralidharan sir, we South Indian states have a lot of expectations and in terms of GST, in terms of support system, everything from this budget. And we realized that it's 1.3 billion expectations from Union budget to 2022. So some are addressed, some are not addressed. But considering the fact which is accelerating the economy in overall. For example, Tamil Nadu plays a very important role in GDP. It's in number 2 or number 3, always between that position in terms of national GDP, next to Maharashtra. For example, if you take Telangana, it's considered to be a tech head, spearheading all the technology company and everything. Bangalore, the same thing, SAS and IT, other IT sectors. But we need more focus on the, supporting these kind of economics, particularly in the south states. And we are expecting one thing I would say personally, I welcome the decisions on spending on infrastructure. Rightly said by my colleague, there was an announcement of 7.5 lakh crore capital expenses, but we didn't know what exactly the breakup, where it is going to be. And I would say India should invest more on infrastructure development, particularly on logistics infrastructure, not only the roadways, we need to have more waterways and roadways as well seamlessly, so that the export things will get triggered, which will definitely support our exports, environment, and support the MSMEs to explore the opportunities of export opportunities overseas. I'm into construction myself and into real estate. I always have a grievance of the GST, 5% additional charge to the customers. In Tamil Nadu, for example, we have a stamp duty of 11%. For example, if I'm selling a house of a value of say 1 crore, I need to charge 11% stamp duty and additional 5% GST. So it's totally 16%. If a middle class or upper middle class want to buy a home, they have to pay the 16%. Addition to that, we are not getting any rebate in terms of real estate construction. So all the GST, like steel, cement, if you compounding everything, we'll be charging the customer at least 25 to 35% more than the actual value. And government is having a scheme of housing for all scheme. With this burden, I don't see a real circle closing on GST for real estate and housing. And as everyone knows, housing and real estate is contributing almost like 9% of the GDP, which is a very huge amount. And not addressing this definitely will push the lower middle class and middle class cannot buy houses in near future. So that thing we addressed to the finance minister 2 months back when she was in Chennai through Fiscal, and we got some answer. We didn't get some answer, and we are trying to Tamil Nadu government to give some subsidy on stamp duty, at least to give some enthusiasm to the public to buy new properties in coming years. So that is one part from my industry personally, and I am also doing projects in Maldives, and we are exploring opportunities in Africa. But every time we go to a port, we have a lot of struggle. We have office in Singapore. The dollar transfers, the TTs, inwards, outwards, the invoicing, customs, a lot of things to be addressed. When we want to compete with like a country like China, we need to really run in the same track what China is running. That would be my perspective on, if we want to really compete with the globally, we are such a big country and having a lot of potential. A lot of matters to be addressed, particularly in the system, in the banking system. Yeah, I do understand certain people exploited it, misused it, but the majority should not be, taxed for that. So that's what happening in terms of, for example, if I want to transfer, say, $50,000 to a Singapore company or my Maldives some supplier, I have to submit at least 40 papers to the bank every time. But if from my Singapore subsidiary, it's online. With mobile, I can transfer millions of dollars. So these things, we need some solution, practical solution, so that we really compete with the global players. And also, whoever multinationals coming inside, they are getting funding at 3%, 2%, 4%. Still, we are getting at 10 to 15%. So these are the things government should think about, support the industry and business people, I would say. the taxation, other ones, there are a lot of experts in the panel, they will speak about, and I want to speak about my practical issues of my fellow business people here. And thank you very much for the opportunity. And I conclude this speech because of my throat. I cannot continue further. And I'm very glad that I met you all. And hopefully we meet all in physical very soon after this pandemic situation is over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. May I request Dr. D. Dhanuraj, Chairman, Center for Public Policy Research, to please introduce the economist, Dr. Manas Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, City Southern India Council leadership for partnering with us to organize this event. It's a great privilege to be among with all of you. And as a public policy person, budget, union budget is always a kind of eye opener for many of us, especially working in the public policy field, because I still don't consider union budget is a big public policy statement. I mean, I generally consider it as a balance sheet of the government of the country. But a lot of discussion happens around this union budget every year. And we listen to experts, we listen to common man on the street, we listen to different stakeholders who are part and parcel of this India's growth story. So always a delightful opportunity to have this occasion every year. Yesterday, while I was giving my views to some of the media houses, I was sharing my learning in the last many years since I started my career as a public policy researcher. Budgets are always interesting, and this time the budget gives some sort of continuity to what government has been talking about for the last many years. And it's not a populist budget, interestingly. I mean, even though we are in the middle of 5 state assembly elections, which are very important to the current dispensation. So they were not under pressure, I believe, or they are very confident about winning or retaining the states that they're ruling now. And we are also having a huge focus or thrust on the capex this time. And I'm not surprised, because for the last 2 years, government has been reiterating this point that infrastructure buildup is very important. But as a policy person, I have some issues there. I don't know how much they are going to take the interest of the state governments while they go for the massive buildup processes. Because I think, my assessment last many years working with the different state governments, the money is required. Infrastructure is mandatory, I mean, essentials or the fundamentals to the economic growth. But the nature and the mode and the type of the infrastructure differs from region to region in this country. So I hope government listens to the state governments, or they also have a say in coming up with these structures. And then, of course, I think once finance minister started reading from a tablet, I think it also gives you feel of the nature and the style and the way we look at economies changing, and government started accepting the fact that it's no more the old ideas of economies that we are used to. So government, I think finance minister talked a lot about digital in her speech. And I also I'm so happy that I think it's a trademark of finance minister that she's very particular with the fiscal prudence and fiscal management, and she stick to that 6.4. But even though I have some doubts when you look at the numbers. So I'm not an economist. I am a public policy researcher. We are all patiently waiting for listening to the expert economist on this panel, Dr. Manas Paul. Manas is currently a professor and area chairperson in economic environment policy at IMT Ghaziabad. He has over 20 years of post-PhD experience as an economic strategist in the banking, finance, and education sectors. His industry expertise spans micro business research and research management in different roles across various organizations like HSBC, Axis Bank, Securities, Trading Corporation of India, and Ministry of Finance, Sultanate of Oman. His PhD in economics is from IGIDR, Mumbai. It's my pleasure to invite Dr. Manas Paul to discuss the pros and cons of budget 2022. Over to you, Namaste.
Thank you, Dr. Dhanraj. Thank you, Mr. Muralidharan, and all the chairs out there. Thanks for this opportunity. Being an economist, we tend to depend on some presentations. So please allow me to kind of share a small presentation that I have with you all. So what I would do is that I will so I hope that the presentation is, the slides are visible.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So now, once we talk about the budget, the thing is that, how do we appreciate it? So how do we appreciate it? Because that's a thing that we tend to look at it. So I think there are different steps as an economist when we try to look at it. So obviously we tend to look at the economic backdrop, and then we talk about the different expectations, the proposed deliveries, versus expectation, and the credibility of the projections made, and then obviously the quality of the spending and the fiscal marksmanship. So these are some of the things those are looked into from the economic perspective in terms of appreciating the budget. But having said that, as Mr. Dhanraj was saying, it's an election year. So we cannot ignore the political economy and not to forget the farmers, recent agitation. So I think this gives a backdrop, the domestic backdrop, in which the budget or got presented. Now, in terms of the economic backdrop, well, we have a good recovery, so to say 9.2%. Well, was that really good enough? Can Omicron kind of really temper the estimated growth? So those are some of the things. Those are there. But if you look at one of the important sector, which is services, so that sector, even if you take into account the advanced estimate, they are showing an year-on-year negative growth. This is one crucial thing, and a lot of it could have to do with the services of the different services which got impacted during the pandemic. And then if we look at the production level, what's happening in the economy, the IIP is the growth is petering off. There is a persistent contraction in the capital goods. So the good, in this perspective, if the government say that they want to bring in some amount of capex, well, I think it would be good, for the economy. And what was the industry saying in terms of demand? If you look at the Hindustan Unilever third quarter, profits, that really overshot. Thought about possibly strong rural demand, though there are views that this demand must be or could be softening at the back of a high base and rising inflation. So this is where the backdrop is, and then we have an international backdrop. We find that the domestic inflation is really surging ahead, and this is not only the headline inflation, my dear friend, but it's also the core inflation, which is a cause of worry for the Central Bank of India. And if you look at the right-hand side figure, we see that the Fed rate, well, the Indian policy rate, tends to move pretty strongly, or there's a huge amount of correlation of the movement in the Indian policy rate with the Fed rate. And recently, the Fed has started off to posture in a very aggressive way, which talks about significant Fed rate rises over the year. There are expectations about 5 to 7 rate hikes down the year, and obviously, Indian economy cannot be it's not that it's more so that the Indian economy would be impacted if such of aggressive rate hikes happen, and if India doesn't resort to rate hikes. So I think there would be a compulsion on the Reserve Bank of India just trying to look at the forex front to do a couple of rate hikes down the year. So this is where the thing is. And if you look at the cycle that we are seeing in the economy, well, the business confidence has been wobbly, and the capex cycle has seen some improvement. So if you are looking at a situation where interest rates are on the rise, so that could be a deterrent for the capex, to follow or to kind of pull through, unless and until the demand is very, very strong enough. So this gives a backdrop at which the budget was placed, and there obviously were different sorts of expectations. So some of the broad expectations those were, but obviously it would support capex to and here to have the private sector participation. The government should heavily spend in the infra projects to draw the private participation. There would some sort of support for the industries with greater employment intensity, like textiles, tourism, leather. Was expected because there was a huge amount of job losses post pandemic. There were also kind of initiatives or the expectations of initiative to rejuvenate the disrupted supply chain, because a part of the ongoing inflation has been attributed to the existing disruption those might be there in the supply chain. So some amount of initiatives to kind of rejuvenate the existing supply chain would possibly be very, very important. Obviously, that doesn't undermine the creation of new kind of supply chain, but existing chain, if that could be supported, that was also an expectation. And the biggest expectation was they should not be retracting back from the reform process, given that we have elections this year, next year to be followed by the general election. There were also expectations of supporting the household income at the back of the job losses which has happened post-pandemic, and the recent CMI data shows that the number of salaried income holders have gone down post the pandemic, and obviously that has had an impact on the demand, on the income and the demand. So that was expected. There were also an expectation to support the lowest income group, who were relatively more impacted. And if you look at the data on the people who are asking for jobs under the Manrega, that has gone on to from 1.7 crore to 2.4 crore by the end of December. So there was a huge demand for this job, and people are demanding those jobs because they have lost their their existing livelihood. And besides, there were also some sort of expectation in the rationalization of GST slabs, and some soaps for the sectors like two-wheeler and on health, and not to mention the exporters always have been asking for some reduction in the customs duty, especially for products which are getting into the manufacture of Indian exporting or of Indian export. So these were some of the broad expectations, and which was genuine given the background at which the budget was being presented. So now we have the budget. So what are some of the positives that have come out from the budget? Okay, so obviously a budget cannot be all positive, cannot be all negative. It's more likely to have a mix of both. So what are some of the positive, positives those have come out in the budget? So one thing is that, obviously, the intent on infrastructure push, which all of us are saying. My panelists, the chairs, the panelists before have talked about there, and the other thing is that their kind of resilience to not be so populist, what Mr. Dhanraj was saying, just despite being a poll-bound year, and so they have thought of reducing the subsidies, though that has been taken not taken that well by the farm bodies, especially at the back of the farmers, agitation, which we have seen in the recent past. Now, there has also been a significantly higher capital outlays on the transport and highways, so which is also a good thing. It will have a lot of multiplier effect down the line, and it will also supply or kind of support the supply chain. Besides, since I think Mr. Rudra was talking about the education, there were 22% growth in spending in the school education and literacy, which used to be in single digit earlier. So that's also a very good thing, given that people have, or the students have suffered at the back of the pandemic. And there has been a significant digital push on new age industries like EV and drone technology. But what appears to be much more prominent is the national digital health ecosystem, which will give a platform for others to provide different sort of services. So these are some of the things which will have an impact on the so-called startup ecosystem as well. There has been a mention of the mental health program, which is definitely an issue. It has almost, like an epidemic, though we do not just realize that. And obviously, different measures which have been supporting supporting the startup ecosystem. So on the whole, there has been a good amount of positives, though we need to understand the impact of digital currency, and especially so for the banks per se, how that would impact their business, if at all. So these are some of the things which we need to understand. But nonetheless, there has been some positives in the budget. Now, if there are positives, what are some of the negatives in the budget? Obviously, a budget cannot be all positive, or seldom is a budget which is all positives, I could say. So now, if you look at the capital spending, now we have said, well, there's a significant increase in the capital spending, 7.5 lakh crore. But if we take two elements out of it, the transfer to state and those for the Department of Telecoms, and if we club the rest of the capital spending, the year-on-year growth is as a meager 1.3%, which otherwise used to be in double digits. For FY21, it was of 23%. For FY20, it was 10. For FY19, it's 16. So that we need to understand this capital spending data very, very seriously. So what it means? Well, definitely there are positives for the Department of Telecommunications, but in terms of transfer to states, well, that is where it is kind of a bundle. For the rest of the things, it doesn't seem to be that much of a growth. Besides, there has been a reduced spending for the rural development that shrunk by 11.5%, and that is not a good thing. If we do not have a rural demand, then that will impact a lot of our businesses, be it the so-called consumer goods, two-wheelers, and hence the ancillaries thereof. So that will have an impact out there. Then the spending spending on health and family welfare has remained stagnant, at around 8,300 crore. It has been a stagnant, at the revised budget level, and which is not a good thing, because we need to develop our health infrastructure, and the impact of COVID has shown how much kind of investments could be required. So something better out there would have definitely been kind of more appreciated. Then there has been a reduced allocation for Manrega. As I said, there's a huge demand ongoing as per the same. Just as per the data of kind of work for the Manrega program, but it has been revised back to the FY22 budget levels. So this will possibly again be a dampener on rural demand. Now the capital outlay on defense services, though it is at 1.5 lakh crore, but it simply implies a very modest growth of 9.7%. And that is at the back of a very moderate growth of 3.4% in FY22, when this growth usually used to happen in the high or in the high 15-16% earlier. So when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, when we talk about using that or using our defense spending to kind of support the Atmanirbhar Bharat, some amount of growth out there, the growth just which we see is relatively modest relative to what used to be earlier. Besides, the budget lacks the specifics to support the normalization of disruption in supply chain, which could be a contributor to the inflation. And if that happens, obviously, that is not a good thing from the industry point of view. It will impact both the consumption demand as well as the investment spending down the line. So the back of this, positives and negatives, how does the estimates of the revenue expenditure deficits pan out? So whatever the data has been or the budget has been provided for, how do they really gel with our experience so far? Well, the budget have accounted for tax buoyancy. By tax buoyancy, what I mean is that the percentage change in the gross tax revenue as a ratio of the percentage change in the nominal GDP. So that's the tax buoyancy, which is around 0.86, could be slightly moderate. So there is some, positives, if the economy could bounce back. But the elasticity of government expenditure to GDP has been estimated at 0.42. Now, when I talk about elasticity of government's expenditure, what I mean is that the percentage in government spending divided by the percentage change in nominal GDP growth. So that is at 0.42, which is unusually low from the averages of around 0.77%. So 0.77, which implies that there is a high risk for the expenditure to overshoot the target. If that is the case, other things remaining constant, that would obviously imply that the deficit numbers would go up compared to what it is being projected right now. The other thing, well, if you do not want to increase the deficit, the easy thing that would happen, the casualty would be the capital spending, because the revenue spending is very difficult to really tinker with, but capital spending could be axed. So these are some of the things that we have seen. One other thing which needs to be really counted for is that amongst the expenditure, if we talk about the revenue spending, which is budgeted at 0.9%, which is abnormally low when the average is in low double digit, around 10 or 15, around that percent. So all these things point out that possibly the spending budget or the budgetary spending are likely to be overshot, and it will have its immediate fallout. So the impact are obviously twofold. One is the expansion in the fiscal deficit. Well, that means larger government borrowing, and this is not an ideal thing for the business and the markets, given that it will have its adverse impact on the interest rate, and which would get obviously compounded and complicated at the back of aggressive Fed tightening. So this could be one fallout, and it will have further impact on rupee as well. So the Indian businesses could be hurt both in terms of interest rate as well as to as higher higher USD INR rate, which could increase their cost of imports. At the same time, or as I said, if we want to rein in the fiscal deficit, the other thing could be that it will hit the capex, and if it does so, if there's a compromise on the capex, then it could really work against the current rhetoric of boosting capital spending. So we need to be very careful on this thing, and we need to have a very modest but yet a very practical view on the economy. So with that, I would like to thank you all. So I would like to come to the end of my presentation.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Paul, in sharing your view on budget whole of 2022. May I request Mr. Sandeep Parikh, partner of BDO India, to present on indirect taxes. Sandeep sir, are you there? Hello?
Sandeep is there. He's just trying
He's
to.
on mute. Yeah.
You're on mute.
Some problem.
Yeah. Your audio is not coming, Sandeep.
Sandeep sir, please go ahead.
Yeah, made the co-host.
I think we'll just give Sandeep a minute to set it. Let me also try to reach.
Can you hear me now?
We
Yeah.
can hear you. Your audio is coming. You want to share a presentation? Your presentation.
Oh, yeah. Sorry for there was some technical glitch. Sorry for that. I'll quickly present my presentation. Yeah. So after an interesting insight, Dr. Paul, and some technical glitch, I now present the indirect tax proposals. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yes, it's coming now.
It's coming now, sir. We can see your
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for the patience. Yeah. So I would quickly take, firstly, thank you everyone, for inviting us to share our views on this budget. I will take you through the indirect tax proposals, and GST has been a burning issue, and all eagerly await what's going to be there in GST. While it was a 3-minute, the Honorable Finance Minister spoke only for 3 minutes about GST, and one emphatic statement which was made is a collection of 1.41 lakh crore rupees, in the month of January, and indicating that the collections have been increasing significantly, and showing that the economy is growing well. But while that's a very good sign, but one of the reasons for growing collection, other than the key factor of economic growth, is also the tightening of the compliances and also the various changes which they have brought in the entire process of identifying tax leakages and tightening all the processes to catch hold of businesses and ensuring that proper compliance is done. Also in this backdrop, I would quickly take you through the amendments. The first amendment is about credit note provision. So it says that the credit note can now be issued till November 30th for a previous financial year. Earlier, this date was till 30th of September. So when we end 31st March, we were having 6 months time, but then there was a lot of request from the industry that the books are not closed by then. So this has extended till 30th of November. Similarly, a procedural change, a late fee provision for e-commerce operator has been changed. It has been inserted. There has been and one more very interesting amendment in tax payment provisions. Now a registered person can now transfer his electronic cash ledger to his own PAN number or to his own registration in another state. So many states were facing this issue that there is a cash surplus in one state and there is a cash deficit in another other state. So now they propose to enable a provision by virtue of which the cash of one GST registration in state A can be transferred to the other. Now government has also empowered. On one hand, they have given this benefit. Now the government has also taken some control. Now credit, input tax credit on all the inward supplies, is being monitored very closely. As we all are aware, and a lot of challenges and a lot of problems are being faced by the industry at large. Now the government has also now again taken control over here, and they say that the government will be empowered to determine how much credit a business can utilize to discharge its tax liability. Now, say for an example, if you have a 100 rupee liability and you may want to discharge it, say using 60 rupees as your input tax credit and 40 as cash, but now the government can tell you no, you should use only 25 as credit and pay 75 as cash. So this is one provision which all are worried about and are wondering how will it be implemented, and there may be a lot of debate around this going forward. So one has to be very careful and look out for this, how this pans out. One interesting and one good welcome amendment is about the reduction in rate of interest to 18%, and also so earlier the provision said that if a credit on your inward supply has been claimed, there was an interest implication, but now it has been amended, and this has been amended with effect from 1st of July 17. It says that if the credit has been taken, availed as well as utilized, and it is not restricting to only availed. So even if you may have wrongly availed, but if you have not utilized, you may not be liable to pay interest. So this is a welcome amendment, and the rate of interest has been reduced in such cases from 24 to 18. Retrospectively, it is being proposed to be implemented retrospectively from 1st of July. So this is a welcome amendment. Moving on to input tax credit provisions. In the previous slide, as I had mentioned that the government will take control or proposes to have bring in enabling provisions by virtue of which they can dictate or they can guide an assessee that how much tax he can pay using his credit and how much he can pay using his cash. Further to that, the input tax provisions have now the assessee, if they want to use, if they want to discharge their liability, they will get a auto-generated statement from the portal, and this is being proposed. That statement will have two parts. Part one will say that this is the amount of input tax credit which you can offset against your outward liability, and part B will say that this is the input tax credit which you won't be eligible to avail. Now this is interesting. Now, why would we not be eligible to claim input tax credit? And there would be various reasons. There are these 4 key reasons which I have been highlighted. Is suppose your vendor has defaulted in making a tax payment, or your vendor has disclosed the tax liability as much higher and has paid lower tax. Your vendor has availed more ITC, input tax credit, than what has been disclosed by the auto-generated statement which he may receive. Or your vendor has availed or utilized input tax credit more than the prescribed limit. So suppose if the government has told him you use 60% as credit and 40% as cash, and he has not followed that. So what comes out from this amendment provision is that your vendors non-compliance can cost dearly to you. So as a service, as a recipient of inwards of supplies, you have to now also be mindful with whom you are doing business. Are they compliant? And if they are not compliant, then there may be restrictions on you to avail credit, and this would be a serious cash flow issue for the business. And then again they have to follow up and ask them to make good the compliances and so on. So this is one provision. I think there may be a lot of debate and deliberation around it. Further, the due date has for issuing a revised invoice for cancellation of invoice or a debit note for a previous financial year has also been extended to 30th November. So we get from September to November it has been moved. One more important change is presently we were availing credit on provisional basis, which has been done away with, and you'll have to avail credit on self-assessment basis, following all these principles or processes which the government proposes to bring in. Moving on to the next slide, filing of returns. Now again the the errors in the returns can be rectified by 30th of November, which was earlier 30th of September. So a few more grace months been given over here. A non-resident taxable person can file the return by 13th of the following month. There was when GST was built, the entire architecture was in such a way that the supplier will upload, the buyer will be in a position to see, then he will be in a position to accept or reject, and so was the architecture built. But the way in which it has been evolved, all these things couldn't be achieved, and hence this two-way communication process has been done away with, which was there in the architecture. Now everything the government will dictate, while the basic provisions for availing a credit will be there, that you should have received the services, you should have the valid documentation, you should have made payments, and in addition to that, all those restrictions which I spoke in my previous slide. The next point is amendment in registration and cancellation provisions. It has given some powers to the government that if returns are not filed for a specified number of months, then the government can cancel the GST registrations. Now there are some rate changes which have been done retrospectively. These changes are in case of waste generated during production of fish meal, that will be exempted from 1st of July. Similarly, the license fee paid for getting liquor license paid to the state government for getting liquor license exempted retrospectively. But all what have been paid, no refund will be provided, has also been mentioned. Now, amendments to refund provisions. The tax authorities can now withhold or deduct the amount of any kind of refund payable to the tax officer if the assessee has defaulted in making the payment of tax, interest, or penalty. So basically, he can appropriate the refund available against the open liabilities. They have clarified what is the due date for SEZ to file returns. there would be a new form which will be introduced to refund the cash balance. And moving on to the next slide, now we move to customs. Customs, one of the biggest change or the most talk about change which we could observe is there was a recent judgment of in case of Canon, wherein the Honorable Supreme Court had held that the DRI officers, the Department of Revenue Intelligence, the officers from the DRI cannot issue show cause notices because they didn't have the relevant power to issue show cause notices and adjudicate a matter. So because the law did not have the enabling provisions, and there were a lot of issues around it and a lot of litigation around it, and all the courts were, by virtue of these judgments, were holding the inquiries, etc. Beyond the powers. So to overcome this particular challenge, an amendment has now been brought in where the definition of proper officer has been amended, and the officer from Department of Revenue Intelligence will be a proper officer. So now he can conduct inquiry and issue a show cause, and similarly this CBIC can also issue assign functions to such officers. So powers given over there to take care of this issue. Similarly, faceless assessments are being talked about, and so 2 or more officers can concurrently exercise their power to do an assessment. Also, a jurisdictional custom authority will have the sole exercise to reopen or to do a reinvestigation of what he had done earlier. So these are some important amendments giving power. One more amendment which is brought is when we go to Customs Department, we submit a lot of sensitive information, and it was observed that some of the information was unauthorized use of such information was there. So to curb this, they have bring in penal provisions by virtue of which it will be punishable if such data is shared or it has been unauthorized use of such is punishable. Now there are amendments in the advance ruling provisions. Now this advance ruling, generally one goes and to the office and tries to get a ruling in favor and on a particular transaction. But now what they have said is, suppose if you feel that you don't want to continue with their application, you can withdraw your application anytime before the advance ruling is being heard. Secondly, they have also brought in a proposal that the advance ruling which has been provided shall be valid for only 3 years, or till the time there is a change in law or facts. So now this would be a bit unfavorable for the assessee, because and one will have to see now can the assessee go and again plead saying that please extend the validity because there are no change in facts and that this should hold good. So one will have to wait and see, but as of now it appears that after 3 years it won't be available. Now other updates. Now again the theme of this budget on capex, capital expenditure and thrust to the economy. So to promote domestic capital goods, import duty exemptions granted to capital goods like power, fertilizer, etc., leather, footwear, food processing will be phased out gradually. So the imports will gradually become expensive so that the local manufacturers gain. Similarly, in case of power generation, transmission, distribution, all such cases, similar steps are being taken. Exemptions on inputs like specialized casting, linear motion guide, etc., are also being provided to encourage domestic manufacturing of capital goods. More than 350 exemptions and entries are proposed to be gradually phased out, including exemption to certain agriculture products. The objective is, the two objective of rate rationalization are to remove exemption of articles which can be easily manufactured in India, and also to provide concession on raw materials which are useful for manufacturing such articles in India. So with this intention, these exemption entries are being gradually phased out or modified or looked at. One more important amendment is the social welfare surcharge. Again, the revenue intelligence officers were of the view that social welfare surcharge will be payable even if the basic custom duty is is nil, even if the duties are zero. So it has been clarified now by way of a circular saying that if the basic custom duty and duties are nil, social welfare surcharge will not be payable because it is levied on such duties, and this is a welcome clarification which will put rest to a lot of litigation. Now amendments in valuation provision. Now there have been a lot of problems which the government is facing on how to value the goods, and many a times the matter reaches the court, wherein the officer may say that the value as per me is not acceptable, and so to further streamline this process, the powers have been given that the government can prescribe or cast additional obligation to provide documentary proof to assess the value of imports, to clear all such doubts. So the SSCP will be will not have much of a choice but to share all such information to enable the officer to determine the valuation. Then there are amendments in non-tariff notifications. New functionalities such as new forms, monthly statements, voluntary payments, etc., will be introduced on the common portal. So with the view of digitization and ease of doing business, and making it more the portal more interactive and beneficial, there are a lot of amendments which are going to be brought on the online portal, and it will be monitored closely. In a nutshell, this is what are the increase and decrease in rates. So project imports, umbrellas, imitation jewelry, electrical and electronic items, solar cell modules. There would be increase in rates of customs duty on these articles, and ferrous waste and scrap, specified fabric, stainless steel, methyl alcohol, acetic acid, all these will have a reduction in rate of duty. Further, there are proposal to review the customs duty rates further. As at the backdrop of various anti-dumping issues that have been identified, especially in case of solar cells and in some cases of some chemicals, etc. So all these are being reviewed very carefully, and I think we can see some more changes, on these lines. Coming to excise, there are new categories of ethanol blended. A new tariff has been introduced in relation to fuel blends of ethanol. In the budget speech, they mentioned that we need to promote ethanol blending, and the objective is that to that extent there will be less import of crude oil. So the more the blending, the lesser utilization of imported oil. So with this perspective, a new tariff has been introduced, and the basic excise duty has been prescribed on such fuel blends. Further, also to encourage the use of ethanol blending, there is an increase in basic excise duty proposed, or ₹2 per liter on unblended petrol and high-speed diesel. So on one hand, they want to increase, and so with the intention to increase the use of blended ethanol blended petrol, they propose to increase it by ₹2 per liter. So with this, I come to an end of my presentation. Yeah, thank you so much for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Sandeep, for sharing the presentation on indirect taxes. Now we come to the question answer session. I'll just check if there are any questions being asked as of now. Let me just check and get back to you in a minute.
Yeah, sure.
Looks like the audience is already have the doubts clarified. They don't have any questions as of now. So does any of the panelists have any questions to the video partners as such?
Can I be allowed to ask one or two questions, because it's interesting to understand the indirect tax proposals?
Sure, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
And since the expertise out is here, so if I can be given the opportunity to ask this question.
Please, sir. Go ahead, sir.
See, whenever we talk about that, something called, which is virtual digital assets. Now, has they been identified or defined? Which assets will you be calling virtually digital assets? Now, is it only cryptocurrency, or there are other blends of it?
Yeah, so Mr. Manas, I'll take this question.
Please.
This is Ronnie here.
Hi,
so they have defined the concept of what is a virtual digital asset. Now that not just includes cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrency has obviously been the initial internet target, but also includes things like the non-fungible tokens, and basically the broad spectrum. The way it's been defined currently, it has a wide spectrum of coverage except for currencies, right? So except for currencies, and therefore the intent, because if you also remember, they're also introducing a digital currency. So that is not part of virtual digital asset. That is specifically excluded. But everything else, the broad coverage will broadly cover cryptocurrencies, NFTs, etc., as part of virtual digital assets.
Well, does there exist any documentation which clarifies this?
Yes, as part of the finance bill,
okay,
they have defined what virtual digital asset is.
I have a comment to make, and I would like all the speakers also to respond. See, I have been very closely studying and working on the GST, especially the implementation of GST. It's now becoming more and more clear. The government not only wants us to do business, import raw material, manufacture, collect, issue an invoice, collect the money, pay the money to the government, but also make sure all our suppliers, you might have 1,000 suppliers, all of them are compliant. So the entire GST department has washed its hands off. They're not doing anything to collect their money. I don't understand. It's like income tax department says all your suppliers should pay their income tax. So please go and pay, make sure they pay their income taxes. I mean, what kind of act is this? Why we as professionals are keeping quiet to allow the GST Act to be amended? See, GST Act is given a lot of powers in the Act itself, right? The amendment to the Act has a lot of power. Even the courts cannot intervene. So I think our big challenge is in my mind, and I think I want to ask this opinion to others, how many of them are contrariwise to the Constitution, where you have a right to do business? At the end of the day, we don't have a right to do business because you're managing your partners or your suppliers. And GST department has got so many employees who are there, and they're all across multiple states. For example, I have a vendor from West Bengal. How will I go and ensure that he goes and does all the compliance of everything that he does with me? So I'm asking the generic question: how many of us in this room believe that this one-way traffic of putting the entire problem of compliance on the supply on the supplier compliance on us should be resisted, and we should do something about it? Thank you. Anybody can respond.
If I may take, I may share my thoughts. Yeah, so, while we have been assisting clients, and, I echo your thoughts, many of our clients, were facing this challenge. I'm talking about a live example, which I have seen and experienced for a few of my clients. So, the client was filing his GSTR1, which is basically his outward supply returns, but he was not paying the tax, which is the 3V, which he has to pay after filing. And it was an old vendor of the client from years together, but because of the pandemic, they were in financial trouble, which no one was aware. And eventually what happened, they were subject to audit. And we were also, when we, and also we did some, checking and did some intelligence checking, and we came to know that, the vendor has not been paying tax for 6 months while he's filing his returns. And the law provides that for a service recipient or a recipient of supply, you should also ensure that his vendor has made good the tax payment. That has been enshrined in the law. And if your vendor is not paying, then the government was given power to go and catch hold of the SSE who is taking the credit, saying that you have not fulfilled one of the conditions that the tax has been paid. And this caused a lot of hue and cry. And there were writs filed in the court saying that, how can you catch hold of the service recipient or the recipient of supply when the vendor is not doing the compliance properly. And to this, then circulars were issued and CBIC guided the officers on field that, no coercive steps should be taken. First, catch hold of the vendors, ensure that you liquidate his assets to recover your taxes. And, and by virtue of this circular and, all this thing was put to hold and, the matter got a bit settled. But now again, this amendment, when I was reading the finance bill yesterday and it raised eyebrow and it was a flashback for me. And I said, oh God, they are not stopping here. But, and I'm sure that, sir, when this will sink in gradually, again, there is going to be hue and cry from the industry at large. And as you rightly pointed out that, it will be difficult to monitor your vendors. You first monitor your credits and also monitor the compliance of your vendors. So
what do you mean by ease of doing business then? What business I'm in? I'm in the business of compliance or in business of running my business. See, my other point is also important. I think I'm asking a bigger question. Why are we all keeping quiet? Why Ficky and others, some of us should gang up and go to Supreme Court, because the courts of Madras court has given one judgment, another court has given another judgment. Until recently, we were not aware of GSTR 3B filing data, which was not available to us. It was made available only recently. Earlier, I could take an umbrage by saying, I don't know whether he has filed his GSTR 3B or not. Now they have amended so that we get a notification, come to know whether this GSTR 1 invoice is there in GSTR 3B. So what the government is saying, I'm giving you more disclosure, but you go and fix it. I think we have to go and reach the fundamental rights of why to run the business. And I don't think if you don't gang up and go to the Supreme Court, because Supreme Court is sitting on it nicely, waiting for all this to become a bigger issue, somebody should go to Supreme Court and all of us should gang up and file a suit saying that we as a community cannot do this job. Otherwise, don't pay salaries to all the GST guys. What is their business? He disclosed this. Already a person has disclosed his liability. He's already, there's a liability provision for payment of interest, delayed payment interest you have provided for him. So he has got an option to pay the interest whenever he wants to pay. That's why interest has been provided for delayed payment. But disclosure must happen. This GSTR 1 he should file so that my GSTR 2B and GSTR 1 is matching. Right? That I can understand. That means I will insist that my party should file the GSTR 1. But beyond that, 3B and making payment and my payment is included in that. How do I know which out of 100 rupees he paid, how much belongs to my income invoice? Disclosure may be there. Right? I see the problem with GSTR 3B, you can't make part payment. You have to make 100% payment. So even if he has got two parties who have not paid the money, he cannot file your GSTR 3B. So I think my bigger question is, we as an association body should gang up and go and fight for it. Otherwise, we will be wiped out, I'm telling you. Because it is a criminal offense at some point of time, because you're taken credit, then he can file, they can stop your assets, they can discontinue or deregister you. What are possibilities are there? Supposing they say that tomorrow they come and say, no, we are removing GST registration. My entire business is gone because all my customers are all asking for GST registration as the basis of my working. You wiped out my business. It's a reputation issue. More importantly, continuity of business issue. Then we'll be running behind. Registration cancellation is a serious part now. It's no longer a casual thing. So all these penal provisions and one-sided way of transactions of GST, which is not the case in income tax. You see, income tax has been far better. For example, the November deadline of this thing, or September, November, is not there in income tax. Supposing TDS, they have not filed the TDS, you collected TDS and not remitted. In the year in which you pay, we used to get the credit in that year, right? What are the TDS norm? The idea is, he doesn't pay, you don't get the credit. But when he pays, give me the credit. Now, arbitrarily, you fixed up a time limit of November. I mean, who are you to decide? What is the basis of this? 3 years, there's a limitation period. If you see limitation law, the limitation law is 3 years. Where is this 18 months coming from? And if you're doing a transaction in the month of March, you're only 6 months in the time window for you to make sure the other party complies. So it's a completely one-sided, GST law is one-sided. GST department has washed their hands of the responsibilities of doing what they're supposed to do when disclosure happens. And as an industry, we're just keeping quiet. I'm sorry, I'm speaking because I've done a lot of research. I'm fighting with the Telangana GST. The CGST is very, very nice person. We got a fantastic chief commissioner. But she's also trying to say nationally this is the policy, what we can do at the state level.
Yeah, surely, sir. Now this mechanism which has been prescribed recently, or they are proposing to bring in, by virtue of which, one will get a statement of utilization. We will have to look at it carefully, and definitely, representations will go, requesting for some relief over here, because it will be a difficult, task for.
Time is gone, sir. Time is stopped for giving representation. Nobody cares for representation unless you go to court and get a stay order. Like it happened. They responded to your case. What you mentioned is because court gave an order. Madras High Court and two courts gave an order saying that it is not the responsibility of the party to go and make the supplier payment. They gave that order and immediately department responded, right? We have to go to legislative system. I mean, the only way to fight legislature or this unisided thing is to go to court. Representation has not worked. All of us have made so many representations. FICCI itself has made so much of representation. Who's reading them? I don't know. They're reading also representation.
Valid point, sir.
No, I'm asking this because a lot of chairmen are there in the various states, and I'm asking Rudra, all of them are there. Kindly please respond as a state chair what we should do as FICCI. Are you there, Rudra? Any comments?
Rudra sir is there, sir. And Mr. Dhanuraj is also there.
Bhupesh is also there. So I would request some of the chairs to please comment. I don't know. They are probably not able to.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay.
Sir.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Please come.
I heard you, sir. I mean, I think we as a public policy think tank, we work with the industries, and we in fact closely work with the FICCI Kerala chapter. So it's always a pleasure, helping, supporting, and these are some of the issues that you raised here is very important and relevant. And as you said, we are very late acting on these concerns. I'm coming to Hyderabad a couple of days, couple of weeks time. Where I will meet because we have some project with the Telangana government also. Anyway, we will discuss it later. So I have a question here to the industry experts, because I think what we are hearing now is everybody is talking about capex. It's a big and a kind of boom that everybody is expecting out of this capex. But I don't know whether we're going to the finer details of the capex. Like Dr. Manas Paul discussed. What is the expectation from the industry as such when we talk about capex? It's only about those big infrastructure projects, or is there any other expectation from this capex? I would like to hear from the industry because I've been attending various shows since yesterday afternoon. Nobody's actually going to the finer details. Everybody's giving a generic statement, oh, capex is great, we need this infrastructure development. But exactly the industry is looking.
I'll go first, and before I ask the other chapter chairs to speak, Manas Paul, I think there's also one important thing included in the capex. I think Air India payment is also there. I think 50,000 crores, right? That's also part of 7.5 lakh crores. The Air India
No. I think that is. I mean, only I think 5,000 some crore or something.
No, 50,000 crores.
50,000 crore, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big amount. 7.5 lakh, 50,000.
So that has been in this year. I'm talking about the capex for the next year. Yeah. So I'm talking about the whatever data. If we talk about in terms of the capex growth, if we take out the data for the transfer from to the state and the data for the spending on telecommunication, then actually if you put the rest of the thing together, the increase is just 1.9%.
Yeah, we got that. I'm just answering his question, Dhanraj's question. See, I think our concern as a government, as an industry body, is to set some output norms for, let's say, logistics cost. For example, the government never says our transportation cost per kilometer, per ton of transportation should come from so many rupees to so many rupees. Moment they put it, we can assess whether what should be the capex required to make that happen and what should be the supportive cost, for example, petrol price, diesel price. The government never says that. So we don't know what the outcome is going to be. Supposing I put 5 lakh crores, I put 10 lakh crores. We don't know what that means, right? We also know level of corruption. Let's leave it aside for the time being. All of us see what is happening is I'm talking about as a common man. We are very excited when you go into 7-lane roads, etc., right? But the fact remains that money has been spent by public money. And was the money well spent in terms of the return? Nobody asks, because you are driving, I'm driving, we're happy. That's it, as simple as that, right? So our industry problem is, when we talk about investment, earlier PPP model was a big thing. Look at power, look at infrastructure. PPP model has failed miserably across the board, right? Many of these guys have gone bankrupt. Many of them are big defaulters to the bank system right now. So the PPP model has failed. Now the only model is government has to invest that money and directly under their investment capacity. I think that is the first thing industry have realized, that it is better that the government invests it on project basis rather than a PPP model or any other model. In my mind, it's not a workable model. So first, we recognize, the government recognizes that the PPP model infrastructure has failed and they have to invest. That's the first sign. Second is, what is the quantum of money involved and where it should be spent should be linked to some outcome at the end of the investment. Like, for example, roads. You could define the travel time has declined, must come down from this to this because my cycle time for raw materials should come down. Like China, when we talk about how much time it takes from the port to come to any distance in the city. So it could be a transit time. It should be based on cost of transportation per ton per kilometer. Without these two data available as a plan of the government, what their intention is, we are not able to even make a statement, 5 lakh crores is good, 7 lakh crores is good. I'm not able to make any sense out of this. That's my view.
But taking what you said earlier, we are sometimes a little late responding to this. Now, anyway, government has come up with this 7.5 lakh crore. So I was actually wondering, is industry going to do some follow-up with this government? Usually we have this interaction pre-budget. What is the post-budget interaction that industry associations are planning to take it with the government? So you estimated it. I know budget is a document and finance bill, and it goes to parliament in the next few weeks' time, gets approval, all the debates will happen. But still, I think there is a room space, even if it gets passed and certain accounts heads are created, or it will be following the accounts heads that we have to follow. But what is the industry follow post budget, so that we make sure that some of our concerns are continuously taken up with the ministry?
Rudra or Bhupesh, anybody can like to speak? Akhilesh, anybody else is there? The co-chairs?
No, Mr. Dhanuraj is there, sir. Dhanuraj from Tamil Nadu is there, sir.
No, Dhanuraj is not from Tamil Nadu. He is from policy. Na? He's there. He's the one who's asking the question. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I can see him. But he's asking the question. But I can answer it, okay, to the best of my ability. The fact remains that the entire body, industry bodies, our voice in the government is very weak. In fact, I think we cannot escape that reality. That's what I said. We make a lot of representation before the budget, during the budget, after the budget. But as a voice industry, we still have not strengthened ourselves because there are multiple bodies. There's an ASSOCHAM, there's a CII, there's a FICCI, there's an ASCOM. So I think as a nationally, there is a need to bring all the industry bodies under one forum and get them all into a voice which is powerful enough. I think that is our challenge. So to answer your question, yes, FICCI comes out with a lot of analytics regularly. We look at data of what is the actual spend. We make at the best representation. At the best, we can make a report, right? But what is the impact of what we create? I think it's a question. And for that, I think we need solidity, a lot of uniformity among thoughts among the various industry bodies together. If you do that, I think government will listen. But lately, in the current dispensation of the current government of India, the trade bodies or the bodies like CII, they have a very limited value. This is my honest, I'm talking very honestly what I feel.
Just one thing, if I can, if I would like to have a view on, as you very rightly said, that whatever money is being spent, you need to know where it is, just working. Now, in terms of this, projects, do we feel that whenever the money being spent on national highways, possibly that is where you can have a view that this much of a road would would reduce my travel time from one place to another by this many hours. That is possibly a lot easier to kind of fathom into the business decision. That's one area. That's one, just area.
Yeah, I think the reduction of travel time also has got consequential cost, whether it is the recovery of the investment in the trucks that you spend, apart from petrol and diesel cost. I think that's one variable cost, but other costs also, labor costs are also linked to turnaround time. So airlines, for example, they consciously monitor what is the turnaround time. That's a clear measure of an airport. The time they enter and the time they exit, what is the total time? And that has to be minimized. Ships are doing that right now.
Yeah.
But in the road system, the government has to set that policy saying that from Bombay to Hyderabad, our main industrial corridors are this, from this corridor to here from the airport or from the seaport, it should not exceed so many days, and the cost for transportation must come down. Unless we have that focused on that numbers, it will not help the industry. We'll have some roads where the roads may not be required, the goods are not moving in that road. We don't know where the roads are. The quadrilateral, everybody agreed was a fantastic idea of Mr. Vajpayee, right? That because they connected the 4 major zones. Now they're investing in many other roads. Each of them, even for example, Hyderabad, ORR, which is one of the most flagship projects of this, the traffic is still far less in relation to the investment that you have made. If you really were to ask if the money was invested by a PPP partner, it would have been wiped out. It's because the government invested that money and nobody's asking very simple questions, where is the return on the money? So I think the problem is, it's the same thing what you mentioned, Manas, that if I'm spending money, one, where is it going? But what is the outcome I got? Last 3 years, we have invested in infrastructure, 3.5 crores, 5 lakh crores. Tell me what you got. For example, Manrega. See, I've always said that the biggest problem with the government accounting system is they don't have a balance sheet. They only have a budget of revenues and expenditure. For example, asset created. Where is it recorded? Where is the value of all the assets the government is creating? It's not there there's no publication of that data, right? And similarly, Manrega, one of the biggest weakness of Manrega is whatever assets we are creating based on the Manrega labor, there's no valuation. It doesn't add to the assets of the country as a whole, right? So ultimately, if you have an asset accounting based on whatever investment you are making, and therefore what is the benefit, what is the capital accounting of the investment, and the second, more importantly, is the derivation of the value achieved by investment of that money. And one should have a goal and one should measure the actuals against it. Then we know we are in the right direction or not. That is not there right now. Your department's expenditure, you have seen in the budget, they have mentioned there's a departmental wise breakup of money. Why should we spend that much department for what? We don't know what the department does. We don't have any outcome measurement for them. For private sector, when we go to the government for any project, first question they ask, what is the outcome you will achieve? They're asking me. But they don't ask themselves, what outcome are they achieving?
I think the point you make yesterday, when President Budget, Finance Minister also talked about some committee is going to be formed. I was really, I'm somebody working in urban system for last many years, and we had MNRE, we have JNNUR, we have smart cities, we have armored cities. Still now, to the end of this thing, we are saying that we are going to have a committee. That's one issue I have, because that means that we have not done the homework before we started all these projects. Second, my serious issue is that somebody sitting in Delhi can't come up with some over-imposing ideas how your cities should be developed, because every city is different. And here we are here for livable cities, improving the productivity. So highways are built, but buses are not there on the highways. Right. So it's also not only for industries, actually, it's also for the people who commute to work. That's a basic idea. It's everybody should have better access to better quality infrastructure. But we are not discussing it. That is where I feel like industry bodies have a great role to play in this process, because many people think that once we build railways, once we build highways, is only for the logistics and truck movement. Of course, that is the one purpose of the better quality infrastructure is to reduce the time in commuting. But that is also equally applicable to people who are going to come and work in your industries, right? And you need to have, buses, whatever support system you need. Everybody can't buy cars and drive to your factory, and that is also not a sustainable model at the end of the day. But we are not discussing it. So I was telling somebody, I was sharing my views on one of the channels yesterday. When you talk about this urban, I'm taking one example here. These committees should have formed at the state level, not in Delhi, because they will come up with a grandeur plan. This is what every city should like. But my city, I only know my city. And state level or district level or the local level with industry participation, everybody is participating. These committees should have been formed, and they should have put money so that committee people will work with a desired goal set. So we have problems with all these statements that we are making now.
Yeah, I think it boils down to the same question I asked. What is the measurement of a smart city? Is it by the infrastructure that we create? We should have so many road transportation, so many versions of road, or what is the outcome for the quality of life for the individual? How does it perpetuate certain amount of economic activity there? How many jobs does it create? Now, we don't have outcome norms for any of this. That's the problem with the same thing. The committee will also do the same thing. They will give a very interesting input description of that, and then give us the money to support that input. But what that input will lead to output, we don't. And they don't even have a norm for it. They don't have an expectation. We as a country, we're not expecting our ministers to say, well, you spend money on fertilizer department. What have we got out of it? Tell us what the benefit we got. Except subsidy that you pay out, right? Subsidy, anybody can understand. Farmer subsidy or a fertilizer plant subsidy. But what are the values that you're creating? So I think I made a statement that, this budget should be a business exercise. The moment government start looking at it as a business, then they look at the outcomes, more important than the input, right? We in the business look at only outcome first, and then we look at the input as a means to that end. That's, I think, is the same thing what you said. The committee itself will probably, once they start putting some output norms, it will be transparent to us. What is the methodology adopting? Is it reaching that goal or not? And then we can measure ourselves against that goal. Are we progressing in the right direction or not? Okay, I think we are wrong. Vandana, I think, raising a hand. Yeah, Vandana, I think time out. Over to you, Vandana. Vandana, you have to unmute yourself. Yeah, if you want to.
Yes, sir. That is somebody from the audience. I've asked them to ask the question what they wanted to ask.
Please ask that question.
Yes, sir. I have asked them.
Yeah, Bhupesh, I think I didn't hear anything from you. Any comment to all the conversation we had? Your Tamil Nadu finance minister is so vociferous and so wonderfully articulative, right? I think we invited him for a FICCI event. He hijacked the whole show.
Anyway, so there are some questions. I think this is to Rory. If government imposes 30% income tax on digital assets, will there be the problem of double taxation? For example, if I'm investing 10 lakhs in digital assets on which government has already taxed, again, if they are imposing 30% income tax on my profit from the digital asset. This is from Mr. Jose Chaco.
Yeah, so the way the taxation will work is, yes, your initial corpus of 10 lakhs is subject to tax. If you've invested on a digital asset, let's say 10 lakhs, and if you've made a profit and sold the digital asset for, say, 30 lakhs. So you made a profit of 20 lakhs. On that 20 lakhs, you will be subject to a 30% tax. So what you're making, what you're paying taxes on your profit, on your gains. So there is no double taxation in as much as it's the profit that is being taxed. Point number one. However, there is a catch, which is that only the cost of acquisition is allowed. There is typically in most asset transfers, at least for our normal non-digital assets, you typically have cost of improvements, cost of maintenance, all of that also can get captured in some form or manner. But in digital asset, there is no such mechanism. And second, the loss, let's assume you invested 10 lakhs and let's say assume you sold the digital asset for 5 lakhs. The loss of 5 lakhs, that is 10 minus 5, which you sold for, cannot be offset against other income. For example, you have business income, you can't offset it against it, because the government is treating this as a special class, almost similar to if people recollect the concept of speculative assets, right? The taxation of speculative assets was always treated separately. So speculation income was treated separately. So quite similar to that, digital assets are being treated separately as a class. So the loss you can't offset against anything, gains you have to pay 30% tax. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you. Thank you, Rory. There's another question. What is the take on amendment in section 50 regarding goodwill? Is this?
Yeah, I think if I recollect, that is referencing the last year's amendment.
Okay.
So there was an amendment regarding goodwill, which was essentially this stemmed from how goodwill was treated pursuant to a certain transaction restructuring. So in certain situations where companies were merging, etc., the differential between the carrying cost of the assets of the company that is merging and the consideration paid, the differential was treated as goodwill, and companies were claiming that, amortizing that, depreciating that over a period of time, and claiming a tax deduction on the goodwill. The government was, and this was also blessed by the Supreme Court of India in a ruling in the case of Smith Securities. Government later came back, tried to plug in that loophole, saying that unless goodwill was represented, unless you physically paid for a goodwill and not necessarily an accounting entry, that would not be allowed as a deduction. So that and that also had some bit of retroactivity in the way the amendment was worded. To my mind, the industry still is divided in terms of the response on that. Most companies which have had these kind of situations where an accounting goodwill was created are reevaluating whether or not they will contest these claims. There are positions, tax positions, and interpretations that can be taken, but all of them are very, very fact specific. So, if there is an opportunity for us to discuss the specific facts of your case, we'll be happy to, let you know the facts, how the amendment can be read in. But essentially, the government has plugged the loophole. So unless you have a goodwill on an acquired asset, for example, let's say you're buying a trademark or something that you're recognizing as an intangible, or you're buying certain things that is actually a goodwill and you're paying a price consideration for that, that will not be allowed as a deduction.
Query of this anonymous attendee. And the last question, this one, I'm not sure whether this is relevant over here. Is there any measure to promote biodiesel? Has there any new tax structure or something has been done in the budget to promote biodiesel?
I think there was some amendment. Sandeep, I don't know if you are aware of it. There was something on the tax rates, right?
Yeah, so it was only as I had mentioned in my presentation, that they have levied 2%, 2 rupee additional excise duty on non-blended biodiesel or non-blended petrol and diesel. So making it more expensive than the blended one. So that is one way of trying to put some impetus on blended fuel.
Okay. I hope this answers the query. Thank you once again. I don't think so we have any more questions. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Bhupesh to give a closing statement.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You can ask him. Bhupesh, any closing statement from you?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for everyone for the wonderful session today. And it was not as a formality or just a sake of webinar. It's really a lot of insights and real concerns raised by our fellow colleagues from Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, and Mr. Muralidharan sir. All your points are well taken. Definitely, we will discuss further after this webinar on certain things. I need your guidance also. And thank you very much for a lot of insights on direct taxes, Mr. Roni, and also it's a very great insight from Mr. Dr. Manas, and everyone's contribution today is very well taken, and it gives a lot of insight on budget, and beyond budget there is a lot of discussion happening. And I hope we will continue this and enrich us and also discuss on the solutions. That's what we really need. So thank you very much, everyone, again for the wonderful session, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Over to
So,
Akhilesh.
sir.
Yeah.
Sir, please tell me, sir.
Akhilesh?
Yes, sir. Muralidharan, sir, you are saying something, sir?
No. Over to you for closing statement.
Okay, sir. Fine.
Rudra is not come back, I think. Rudra is not back. Is Rudra back?
No, I don't. He's there, but I think he's,
Yeah, doesn't matter. So you close it now, please.
Yes. So we come to the end of the session. So very interesting session today. On behalf of FICCI, BDO, and Center for Public Policy Research, I would like to thank our, economist, Dr. Manus Paul, for sharing his view. I would like to also thank Sri Muralidharan sir, Chairman TMI Group and Chairman FICCI Telangana State Council for making the discussion very lively and interesting as such. Thank you very much, sir. I would also like to thank Mr. Rudra Chatterjee, Managing Director, Lakshmi Group, and FICCI Chairman, FICCI West Bengal State Council and FICCI Furniture Committee. And I would also like to thank Mr. Bhupesh Nagarajan, CMD Indira Projects and Co-Chairman, FICCI Tamil Nadu State Council. So we will be interacting more. We are also planning to do a next webinar on healthcare, the South India webinar, and we will be having many more such interactions, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I would also like to thank our partners from BDO, Mr. Roni Anthony, for the presentation on direct access and clarifying the doubts of the audience, and also Mr. Sandeep Parekh, partner BDO, for the presentation on indirect access. And I will also thank Dr. D. Dhanraj, Chairman, Center for Public Policy Research, for supporting this event and also participating actively. And last but not the least, the audience and the media for the presence. And I would request the media to give this a wide coverage. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.